Hey guys, welcome back. It's Lucky here. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is very frequently brought up. You know, people are asking about Paragon boards. Everyone's getting to level 50 plus. They've got these Paragon boards. They're opening up the menu and they're going, holy crap, that's a million choices. There's no way I could possibly make the right choices on my own. And you're wrong. And I'm going to explain why you're wrong. And I enjoy you thinking that the Paragon board is insanely complicated and there's no way you could understand it, because then you go to the internet and you look at one of my builds and you follow one of my builds, and I appreciate that. And if you want to keep doing that, hey, that helps me out. But in case you kind of want to understand how the Paragon board works and what's really going on here, and also understand that there's only a couple of decisions per Paragon board, right? There's just a handful of decisions. It's not 100 options. It's really, we're looking at 3 or 4 nodes saying yes, no, move on to the next board. Okay, so once you look at it from that perspective, through that lens, these Paragon boards actually start to become really simple choices. Also, it becomes really easy to understand why you would or wouldn't bother with a certain Paragon board. So let's use this barbarian as an example, and you can kind of apply this to any class because it's going to be the same decisions on every class, more or less. Okay, so first things first, you're going to start here at the start of the board. You're going to have to put points in to go up, left, or up, right? And you usually have like a damage path or a defensive path. And we're almost always going to take the offensive path right away because our defense is more or less set at level 50. You know, we've got disobedience on a piece of gear. That's an aspect if you didn't know. We've got some defensive stats on our helmet, our chest, our legs, right? Maybe even our amulets. Our defense is usually pretty set. And now we're looking to ramp up our damage. And this Paragon board is just an amazing source of ramping up our damage and our defense too. We're going to use it for both. In this case, we're going right. We're taking the extra damage, the extra life. That's very nice to have. And then we're going to go straight to the glyph socket. And usually the first thing you're going to do on a board when you get it is go straight to the glyph socket. There are some exceptions, but that's generally what our mentality is because each glyph carries with it so much power. This one here is applying vulnerable to every enemy that we touch. It's also giving us a massive vulnerable damage modifier right there, 23.9% right now. And that'll go higher the more that we invest in it. And then this one here, 73% increased damage to close enemies. And this one here, 87% increased damage, right? Massive damage multipliers in these glyphs. And so we're really incentivized to go, okay, what's the shortest path through the board that allows us to grab the glyph? And that's almost always the path you're going to see us take when we're putting these boards together. We're just going to go, okay, how do I get from here to here and grab the glyph, right? And so that's basically what we do. We just take the glyph and we go to the next board and we take the glyph and we go to the next board and we take the glyph, right? And that's what we do in every single build. Now, on top of that, right, you see all these other nodes, but 90% of those nodes don't matter. They're just filler. There's something we have to grab. All of these non-blue, non-yellow nodes right here, these ones, right, the white nodes, they're just filler. That's really all they are. There's a tiny amount of min-maxing you can do with those nodes. Like I could have, instead of putting this node here where I got dex, I could have put it here for willpower if I found that I needed just a little more willpower to maybe unlock one of these buffs right here where it says this requires 260 willpower to get that extra 8 fury, right? And so I go, oh man, I can grab willpower and I still have that chain connected, but instead of dex. If you don't need the stat, it's not your main stat, but you have to take a secondary stat. Dex is amazing because actually Dex is adding quite a bit of crit chance to your build. The Dex you get on this Paragon board, it adds up fast and it starts doing substantial amounts of crit chance. So your crit chance will go up drastically as you start filling this out without grabbing a single crit chance node or putting on a single piece of crit chance gear. This board is adding it because the more Dex you have, the more crit chance you have. Nice little thing there, right? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make your way to the glyph, right? Fill out the nodes, right? This one asks for dexterity to get the bonus. It says there, requirements, 25 dexterity. So we are going to want to get as much dex as possible in this red area. Every dex we get in this area is going to increase the damage that we deal to vulnerable targets by 3.1%, right? So we want to get all of the dex nodes in this area. Now, we do that and then we get here and we have a choice to make. Let's see. I'm going to click here so that we can see what that choice would look like. So it pulls up this menu right here. Now, you're going to be able to switch through your 8 different Paragon boards. Every class gets 8 Paragon boards to start. There's usually a couple that are super obvious for your build. And then there's 6 others that are less obvious for your build. Sometimes they might have good sustain options, like helping you not run out of resources so quick kind of thing. Or sometimes they'll have nodes that increase your damage to elite enemies. And you're like, heck yeah, I want that, right? But it's not directly tied to fire damage when you're a fire build or something like that. But then if you're running a fire build, there will be a board that says it's directly for fire damage. Or if you're running a minion build, there will be a board that's all about minions, right? So there's some boards are really, really obvious. And some, when it's less obvious, what you're looking at is either the legendary nodes right here or the rare nodes. In this case, it says the rare node, 10% increased physical damage over time and 10 strength. And we look at those, right? And those are these nodes right here. This is those nodes, these rare ones right here. We just basically look at those and we go, do we want those or no? And if the answer is no, we don't use that board. If it's yes, right? So you, as you can see, you're not actually looking at 100 nodes. You're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes. And it's going to be really obvious. They're either going to say this does this, and you're looking at your build like, I don't do that. I don't slow enemies, so the slow damage doesn't help me, or I don't freeze, so the freeze doesn't help me, right? And it's a very binary choice most of the time. It's very clear if it's going to be useful to you or not. Now, sometimes, as in the case of this build here, we went for this board because it gives us Fury on kill, which is going to be great for sustaining our Fury, right? So we get so much more Fury every time we kill an enemy, then it allows us to whirlwind indefinitely. And that's a really nice thing to have. The fastest way to increase our damage is not running out of Fury, as it turns out for this character. So we're going to grab our Glyph, get that. We're going to grab our increased Fury, which feels great. And then eventually down the road, we will come for something like this legendary node, which is not super essential to the build, but it is nice to have. And then you'll work your way over to the legendary node if you want to. But generally speaking, you know, once you've grabbed your rare node, your legendary, if you need it, you're going to do the same exact thing on the next board. You're going to click, decide which one is going to be relevant, which one has the rare nodes you want. If it does, then you slap it on there in a way, right? You can rotate these boards, right? This is very important. When you're choosing how to slot the board, right? You want to get to the Glyph almost every time. You want to get to the Glyph, and the only way to get to the Glyph is you have to follow the path, right? You have to follow this path. So you wouldn't want this board rotated like this, right? This is a long way to get to this Glyph now. So 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't want the Glyph over here. You would want the Glyph here, right? Because now it's just boom, you're right there. You're at the Glyph really quickly. 9 times out of 10. There are exceptions where you're taking a board because the legendary node is so important to your build or your survivability or something like that. So you would go ahead and you would just flip it around so you're getting to that legendary node ASAP. This is rare though, you know, so 9 times out of 10, if you're not sure what to do with your board, you're just going to do this. And basically, you know, you're just going to follow it. Boom. Now we're going to go up here and it would take us off here. And we could attach the board if I had a chain leading to this right now. Okay. And that's what we did here. We got to this board. I said, hey, I need these stats. 32% damage to elites. Yes, please. I want that. And okay, how am I going to get that node while also grabbing the Glyph and making my way through and off of this board as soon as possible? That's all I'm doing. I'm like, get through here, grab the Glyph, any relevant rares that are on the way. Armor, by the way, is a great node to grab. If you see armor, it sounds boring, but armor is such an amazing defensive stat in the game right now. When you see an armor node, grab that sucker, especially if you feel like you're dying too easily and you're tired of it and you want to be tankier and you want to be able to take a lot of hits. Grab those armor nodes. You're going to be glad you did. Same thing with the health nodes. Grab some of those, especially if they're right there and they're on your way and you're not having to deviate way out of the way to grab them. So that's what we did. We rotated the board so that we go straight to the Glyph, straight to the next board, and we make a slight detour right here to grab 32% damage to elites, which feels great. And then once again, now we've got some kind of oddly shaped boards left, right? These are a little bit harder to get to and off of, but you know, they had some nice stats on them. 10% increased vulnerable damage, 8% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, nice damage reduction, nice increased damage. And that's one of the things that's going to be really important for new players to kind of understand. I think one of the biggest mistakes new players are making when they get into Diablo is they are way underestimating the importance of the defensive stats on their gear, on their aspects, and on their Paragon board. You know, they want to go damage, and then they look for the next damage thing and the next damage thing, and then they get into combat and they just die. And in Diablo, yeah, there's going to be occasions where you're killing things before they have a chance to touch you, but usually that's not the case, especially once you start pushing nightmare dungeons where you're pushing higher and higher tiers so that you can get better and better rewards and you can get more and more Glyph XP, which we'll touch on. That is very important because of how much damage can come from these Glyphs. like this one here, giving us 87% damage increase. This is ridiculous, right? That is a massive multiplier. And that's because we leveled the glyph by running Nightmare Dungeons. So that's why you want to get into Nightmare Dungeons as soon as possible. When you hit 50, you want to jump straight in there. It used to be the case for a brief period at launch where regular dungeons were giving such good XP. There was a case to be made for doing regular dungeons, which are basically just nightmare dungeons that you didn't key into without the glyph reward and the glyph XP at the end, right? So with nightmare dungeons, the difference is you can pick the level of the enemies, and you can choose to fight enemies that are way higher level than you. And when you do that at the end, not only do you get better drops, but you also get more glyph XP. So instead of getting 50% of a level for your glyph, you get 100% of a level for your glyph, or 5 levels of your glyph. The glyphs have 2 important levels to be aware of. The first important level to be aware of on your glyph is level 15. At level 15, the glyph radius increases. So if we put this low level glyph in here, you'll see the radius decrease, right? Now, it's only going out to this node, right? Now, if we put the high level glyph in here, watch what happens to the red area. It got bigger. It goes one node farther, which means in the case of this one, right, this one gets stronger for each point of willpower that we have within the radius. It's not really round, but within the area that it's affecting, right? So it's giving us 87%. If we spec out, for instance, of one of these willpower nodes, right? Boom, we pull that out. Instead of 87%, it's now giving us 76% increased damage while healthy. If we pull out of another one, it's now down to 64%, right? So it going up by 1, right? Neither one of those are in the radius when it's at level 14, right? As well as probably some other ones here. But when it hits level 15, it gets a bigger radius, and boom, it jumps from 50% increased damage at this level to 87% increased damage at this level. Massive power spikes. And that happens for every single glyph as they hit level 15. The other level to be aware of for glyphs is 21. That is the max level for glyphs. So when your glyph hits 21, it's maxed out. Okay, so that kind of covers glyphs and how we progress through the board. And also, I kind of touched on it earlier, but you'll see nodes like this, your rare node, where it says 8% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. Then the next line is 10 strength. And then below that, it says another 4% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies if requirements are met. And that's where it says 493 out of 440 willpower, telling you I have met the requirement, so I'm getting that extra 4% damage reduction. If I didn't, it would be red, like this one. 427 out of 450. So I'm missing out on 10% vulnerable damage because I don't have the dex. So I would maybe want to wander through this board and go, man, is there any path I could take? Like, could I come up this way and get dex instead? And without having to spend extra points, maybe I would do that. Or I would look for items. And this is one of the reasons when you're putting a build together, it'll say something like, look for all stats on this item. So a good place for all stats would be your helmet. You would try to roll all stats instead of your primary stat. Like in this case, I have strength there, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to try to roll all stats now that I've hit this point where I'm missing 10% vulnerable damage because I am a mere 23 dex away. I might be able to get 23 dex on an all stat roll on that helmet, and then boom, this problem's fixed. So that's another thing that you kind of keep in mind. But really, like I said, each board is not 100 choices. Each board is 3 choices, right? It's how easy is it to get to the glyph and then get to the next board so I can get to that glyph, because that's what we're really doing. We're wanting as many glyphs as soon as possible, as fast as possible, because they add so much power to our build. And then also, are there other nodes like Fury on Kill that are going to be really good or really help the build feel a lot better? It's going to fix one of the core problems, the fundamental weaknesses of our build right now, which for a lot of builds is sustain. Like, what can I grab early on to fix me running out of mana all the time? What can I grab early on to fix me running out of Fury early on, right? And then you grab those and you take care of that problem. And you just look at the nodes. Like, do I need it? Do I not? And you move to the next. So if you kind of distill the Paragon board down to the rare nodes and the legendary nodes and the location of the glyph and how easy it is to get to, that's it. That's all we're looking at as build creators right there. All this other nodes that make it look so incredibly complicated, right? If this was just a list of stats and you were like yes or no on the page, and it's like, do you want these stats? Yes. Do you want these stats? No, right? That's basically what you're looking at on these boards. It's just a really simple decision. Hopefully that makes it easier to understand how these boards are put together and how these Paragon boards work and what we're looking at when we're trying to put together these builds. It's a lot more digestible than it looks like at first glance when you're looking at 80 nodes on a page or whatever this number of nodes is, right? It's not actually what we're looking at. We're just looking at the rares, the legendaries, the glyph. How fast can we get to the next glyph socket, and which well-positioned glyph sockets are on the boards that have the best stats for the build. So we can kind of get that 2-for-1. We get a quick glyph and a good stat at the same time. And then we move on to the next board. Quick glyph, get some good stats, and move on to the next board. If you didn't know, you get 1 Paragon point for every quarter level. After level 50, you can get 20 additional Paragon points from your Renown system. That's this system right here. When you max it out in each zone, you get 4 Paragon points. There's 5 zones, so that's 20 extra Paragon from that. So this is really nice to know about when you're going to make an alt. And so what you do is you max out your Renown on your first character, and then when your alt hits 50, he gets to open up this Paragon board and slam in 20 Paragon points right off the bat. Zoom straight up to that glyph, grabs these, and it's a massive power spike for every alt that you're making after that. Also, you actually get more than that because some of the altars of Lilith spread throughout the world give you Paragon points. So another reason to grab those altars of Lilith, if you haven't, some of them count for an entire quarter of a level, which at 50 isn't that big of a deal, but when you're 90, if you somehow haven't done it yet, right, that takes a good chunk of time. Although with the new XP in these dungeons, levels are flying. They're really flying. You can get from 90 to 100. I feel like you could do that in a day now. It seems like it goes so fast. So definitely take advantage of those nightmare dungeons to level your glyphs, to level your character, to get those better drops. Get on this Paragon board and don't be afraid of it. Feel free to follow the build guides. Keep following the build guides, especially, you know, if you're following mine. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of peace of mind so that when you're clicking on here, you kind of feel like you understand what's going on. And then maybe someday, you know, you'll have the confidence to adjust it a little bit to suit your taste or to suit your preferences, or maybe even tinker around and see if you could find a better version of the board than I found, which is entirely possible. I'm just a human. I'm only human after all. I'm playing the game all day, talking to you guys, theory crafting it, but I am a human at the end of the day. You might be able to see something that's going to fit the way you like to play the build better. And hopefully this gives you the confidence to do that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and a thumbs up. If you want, come swing by my stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about Diablo, or just to chat about the game, life, whatever with you. I'm there probably playing the game right now. I'm playing it every day, 7 a.m. Pacific, all the way usually until about 2 or 3 p.m. Pacific. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you're not sure what to do next, maybe watch one of the videos popping up on screen right now, like this guide to gems and why we pick the gems that we do.